I think you're going to love this magical mystery tour of our most primitive sense and its capability of involving us in the healing process. This is something that is a real passion of mine, which is the story of scent. And we have with us today Allison Stillman, who has spent her entire life dedicated to aromatherapy, but far deeper than that, into the ancient rituals, the healing, the actual distillation of essential oils herself. And Allison is with us right now to tell us some of the really magical properties of scent. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you today, Regina, and always happy to talk about my favorite subject in the entire world, which is the world of aromatherapy and all its magic.
It is so deep and beautiful. And, there are many things I think that, we've read through the various books and the application of this oil and that, but oftentimes we don't look deeper into it and its deep subconscious effect on us as a primitive sense of scent. And here we very easily acknowledge the power of sound healing, color and light therapy, touch, obviously, but scent is oftentimes overlooked, yet it has every bit as deep an impact on the healing process. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've also incorporated a lot of those modalities into the world of aromatherapy and the work that I do. And they really go hand in hand. They are a beautiful match. But I think that the piece that I love about aromatherapy is that it actually can get into the molecular structure of your body and change genetic programs, subconscious programming, childhood identification or trauma, or even past life comes lodged in the body sometimes. And I watched how in one session with using oils, it miraculously disappears. Now, the behaviors that are built around some of those subconscious programming, those take a little while, but once you bring all of it up into the conscious mind, then you're aware of what you're working with, and you can make conscious choices to change and create new behaviors and habits, right?
Right.
So I just have never found anything that works faster than essential oils for bringing up the subconscious, old memories, changing the emotions and the behavior, working with the neural structure of the brain, but also working in the subconscious of the body too.
Well, before we get into some of your personal story, which is really beautiful because you were born to do this. In fact, you were born a lot of lifetimes to do this. The whole notion about deep memory makes me wonder, in some of the newer therapies, working with Alzheimer's patients, for example, they try to engage them in their deep memory through music that might have been familiar to them or favorite musics in their past. And I was wondering, can the same thing be done through scent? I mean, I think of my father's generation, and my stepmom has severe dementia, and music helps a little bit. It'll engage her for a short bit, then she's kind of gone again. But no one's really thought of using scents. And you think of their generation, it's like, all of the kind of nostalgic scents such as violets and lavender, but that may not be it. Have you had experience with dementia, for example, and bringing up really hidden deep memories?
Yes, actually, I have. I did a year-long study with a residential care facility in Southern California. And it was born out of caring for an elderly aunt who went into the last stages of Parkinson's, which gets very delusional. And I started bringing oils with me when I would need to ask her questions, and I would have her smell an oil, and it would bring her back to presence. And I could ask the question and get a logical answer, and then she'd go off into her fantasy again. And I had such incredible success with that I met with the director of this facility, and I said, I think we could really help the people with Alzheimer's and dementia. Would you be open to me trying a 6-week trial where we're just smelling different oils and seeing what happens? And it was really fascinating because most people that suffer from Alzheimer's or dementia have lost their sense of smell, which leads to depression. That's very closely linked to depression. And a lot of the dementia and Alzheimer's residents go into sundowning and they get combative and they feel very lost. And what I noticed was that just smelling an oil, whether they could actually smell the aroma or not, had a powerful effect on their emotional being and their behaviors, but also triggered long-term memory. So I had one gal, and I love this story because it was so profound. We were smelling rosemary, which is a great oil to bring clarity to the brain. And she described the sensation of it as it hit her brain, even though she couldn't smell it. And then she had a memory from 55 years ago when she got married to her husband, and there was rosemary on the tables of her wedding ceremony, her celebration. And she hadn't thought of that in 55 years. And just one smell of that oil elicited that memory. The other really interesting thing that happened, which I think is really beneficial for a lot of us who are dealing with the elderly because Alzheimer's and dementia are so on the rise, it affected their behaviors. So it was so interesting when I would leave there, the caregivers would grab my arm and they go, "Can you come more often, please? There's such a difference when you're here," and they're happy and they don't sundown and all these incredible things. So I eventually got them talked into getting a diffuser that they had going all the time. So in the morning, we would do citrus to lift them up and wake them up and bring joy to their system. And in the afternoons, we would do lavender in the diffuser.
So what, after you put the citrus oil in the morning and the lavender in the afternoon, what was the effect on the people at the home?
So in the morning, they would be really happy and ready to start their day and very cooperative. And then in the evenings, they would be very calm. They wouldn't get confused. They wouldn't sundown. They wouldn't get combative. And another really interesting thing about that too, because I was there for a year doing this was the convalescent care part of a residential facility. And there were independent living and assisted living across the street. So we went through a winter with diffusing these oils in the convalescent care center, and the other places did not have that. In the residential, where independent and assisted living, they all got the flu, they all got colds, the caregivers got sick, and not one single person in the residential convalescent care center got sick.
Okay, that's amazing. I mean, forget just in residential living for people with Alzheimer's. I mean, that's an amazing statement for everybody. And because again, you're talking about this notion of this cheerfulness has to be able to boost the immune system. And as you said, with a lot of people with Alzheimer's, they don't have the sense that well developed anymore, that it's really more of the information of the oils or the frequency of the oils that's somehow reaching into their brain and bypassing even their sense of smell.
Absolutely.
So, and we've talked about this the other day when we were prepping for this interview. We talked about it because I'd been a little blue lately over some family stuff, and I just cannot get enough of the citrus family. I'm just dousing myself with grapefruit extract, essence, and lime. I just can't get enough lime, and wild orange and lemon. And I would bathe in it, if it wouldn't burn my skin off. So, I can personally vouch for that. It's a beautiful way to start uplifting the spirits and clarifying the mind. But yes. I know you had another experience in kind of an institutional situation with women at risk, and let's talk about that. I love that story.
Yeah, well, as you said, the citrus oils are very uplifting for the soul. They bring joy to the system, and they shift the emotional and behavioral centers in the brain, because the emotional center and the behavioral center in the brain, the fastest way to access it is through the sense of smell. Mm-hmm. So you can trigger an emotion really quickly. It's the fastest way to get there. So I did a 2-year study at a recovery home in Southern California, and I was working with women who've come off heavy drugs and out of jail and off the streets. And the first time I went, I just remember it so clearly. They were really hardened women, have had a very hard life. And I walked into this room of about 30 of them, and they all had their arms crossed and their hoods over their heads and these scowls on their faces. And they're like, what are you going to do for us, right? Just serious attitude. And I plugged in my diffuser. I got a little orange going in there, and I started passing around the citruses. And the first time they smelled the citrus, big smile across their faces. And by the end of 1 hour with them, I had them crying. I had them laughing. They were hugging me. When can you come back? This was amazing. So the power of just smelling can radically change how you feel.
Absolutely. This is just to me so magical in its simplicity. And you think about it, when we're little kids and we're tearing open the peel off of an orange, or peeling an orange to get to the nice juicy stuff inside, really what hits us first is that burst of those essential oils that's coming out of the peel. And they're not processed the same as blossoms, for example, right? It's a whole different process.
That's correct. Yeah, the blossoms are actually, they go through a process of steam distillation to acquire the neroli essential oil and hydrosol. And then the citrus, the orange, tangerine, lemon, lime, bergamot, those all go through a process of cold pressing, which means after they've taken the fruit and they've created the juice, they take those peels. And for those of you who've ever wondered where the essential oil comes from an orange, if you look at the peel, there's little tiny sacs of oil embedded in the peel. And when you go to peel it, that's what shoots up in your nose and you get the fragrance, right?
Yeah.
Those oil sacs in the peel. And that's what gives the fruit its flavor. It gives it its fragrance. And it tells it when to flower, when to go to fruit, when to go dormant. So all of that is contained in those little sacs in the peel. And they squeeze those until the oil gets pressed out. And that's how you get a citrus oil.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that I think anybody can maintain a feeling of depression when they smell that peel bursting open and those essential oils coming out. It's almost impossible. It's just such a happy, uplifting scent. And also, you just mentioned neroli a little bit ago, and neroli is supposed to be incredible for depression, but a completely, very much more expensive. Citrus oils are super inexpensive and affordable, but neroli is a completely different process. And I know you had a personal experience with distillation of it, and I'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah, so just a little known fact about neroli. It actually takes, I think I'm going to remember this, 65 tons to make 1 pound of oil. So entire villages will come out to harvest the flowers. So I have a really good friend I've done a lot of distillation with in Southern California, and we decided Ojai Valley has a ton of citrus trees. So we decided, well, let's gather our community and let's do a neroli distillation and get some oil out of it. Wouldn't that be amazing? So we had about 20 people, and we spent 4 or 5 hours hand picking these little blossoms. And you have to be careful when you pick them so that you leave the bulb for the fruit intact and you just pull the petals, right? So it's very labor intensive. And we filled up a 55-gallon distiller thinking, oh, well, maybe we'll get a half an ounce of oil. And we got about a 1/4 ounce of oil for all of that effort. But we got a lot of hydrosol, which was a sweet treat.
Oh, no, let's talk about the hydrosol, because that's one of my favorite things. I use essential oils, but I also use the hydrosol, which is part of the process of distillation. And again, it's quite affordable. certainly not as concentrated, but it's just lovely to spray all around you in the morning or before you go to bed. So let's talk about how hydrosols are made and what they are.
Absolutely. So in the process of distillation, you gather your plant material and you put it in this big pot, which is called an alembic. And there's generally a screen, and there's water down below the screen. So all the plant material goes on top. Then there's a source of heat that boils the water to get steam. And the steam goes up through the plant material and breaks apart the water-soluble molecules and the oil-soluble molecules. And it carries up through a condenser at the top of the apparatus and falls into a cache pot. And in that pot, the water separates from the oil, and the oil you skim off the top of the water, but there's water-soluble molecules of the neroli or whatever plant material that are infused into that water, and that's the hydrosol. So while it's not as concentrated and strong as the essential oils, you can also use it fairly regularly without any worry about using too much. With essential oils, you have to be very careful with dilutions and quantities. I mean, it's really a fine science. But with hydrosols, they're really easy to use. Anyone can use them. And my favorite way, which I'll share with you, is to just put a little squirt in my water. And the taste is just like a kiss from the angels. It's so delicious.
Well, that's a good point you're making, because isn't it thought that the neroli scent isn't it called the scent of the angels?
With the neroli blossoms, those grow at the top of the tree, and they're gathering all the sunlight and all the elements. And because neroli is the #1 antidepressant oil, of course, we're going to associate this high, beautiful vibration and this love and this light with the angelic realm. So it's often been times called the oil of the angels for that reason.
Oh, I'll tell you, I love it. I just go out in a little cloud of the neroli hydrosol after I take a shower in the morning. It's so, and it neroli itself, when I put that on, half a drop is so intense that sometimes it's almost overwhelming. Whereas with the hydrosol, you just squirt it around and you go out. It's just refreshing,
Yes,
beautiful, beautiful energy. To
yes.
Yeah, okay. So then what I want to do is get back into your story a little bit, because that'll lead us through to other subjects such as the oils that are used as aphrodisiacs, what men are attracted to, what women are attracted to. And you started out in your grandma's garden as a little girl and just loved all the flowers and the scents. And just tell us that story right up to the forest. Was it a redwood forest where you smelled the rhododendrons? I love that story. I could smell them with you. I've heard you share this before. So let's talk about your own background a bit.
So I really feel like I have been an aromatic alchemist for lifetimes, and that the plants resonated in me so deeply as a child that I found sanctuary. My church was in nature, particularly in my grandmother's garden when I was really little. And then I moved to the South, and again, I found my sanctuary in nature. I was always out with the trees and the plants. And for me, that was the closest I could get to God, if you will. And so then fast forward, when I was 18, I had a very epic experience in the middle of a redwood forest. I was out camping with friends, and I decided to venture off down to the bottom of the Redwood Valley. And I'm walking along the valley floor, and all of a sudden, this sweet, floral, honey-like fragrance started tantalizing my nose. And I was like, wow, I'm in the middle of this redwood forest. What could that sweet nectar be? And I just allowed my nose to follow the scent, and I came upon this 8-foot tall rhododendron in full bloom. And I stuck my head in the middle of all the blossoms, closed my eyes, and the scent overtook all of my other senses. So I could see color behind my closed eyes. I could taste this honey in my mouth. I could hear sound from the plant, the fragrance of the plant. It was such a sensuous, incredible experience. And it awakened this profound sense of smell in me, which was laying dormant, obviously, from other lifetimes. And then, of course, I wanted to study everything I could about aroma and fragrance and essential oils. And I ended up going on a backpacking trip the end of that summer and found patchouli, which was the first essential oil that came across my path. And I packed it in my backpack. We were hiking around Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, and the bottle broke open in my backpack, and it saturated everything. I mean, you could smell me from a half a mile away, right? And I didn't really know much about patchouli at the time. I was still really a novice, but what I noticed was, on an emotional level, it gave me great fortitude and strength and grounding, but it also served to be a powerful aphrodisiac for my then boyfriend. So when I came home, I started playing around with it more and, found some research and found out, yes, patchouli happens to be an aphrodisiac. So it's one of a few of them, but a very powerful one at that.
What are some of the other ones? I'm sure people are saying, what else?
Well, of course, the number one is rose. And rose oil is, well, rose in and of itself has been the symbol of love for a long, long time. And rose oil has been tested. Its frequency is exceptionally high. If we vibrate somewhere between 50 to 74, when they tested it about 27 years ago, they found rose vibrates somewhere around 320. So to me, the biggest, highest we can aspire to is to live in a state of love. So that to me is the ultimate frequency. So rose oil carries that. So if we're using rose, it's going to really expand our heart, help heal old emotional wounds, but it is a powerful aphrodisiac for love, to draw love into your life.
Well, rose is, and it's also becoming more rare. And I think the last bottle I bought of the rose vulgaris, right, was probably 15 years ago, because I used just a little bit of a drop at a time. And I paid about $150 for it then, but I understand that it's become very rare and it's skyrocketed. So let's talk about that. And then about using it in carrier oils if we wish to use it still, but maybe can't afford just the straight essence.
Yes. So I just found some rose oil about 6 months ago, and it ends up costing about $5 to $7 a drop.
Yikes.
So that's what you're paying for. But also, too, like neroli, it takes 65,000 hand-picked rose blossoms to make 1 ounce of oil. So that's exceptionally labor intensive, right? And what we're finding with a lot of the farms and growers is that it used to be the kind of business where the kids would take over the business and they would continue to grow. Well, kids don't want to be farmers anymore. They want to go work in the city and get a tech job or something a little more flashy than being a farmer. We're seeing that a lot with frankincense too. So rose is becoming much more rare, and we're finding more adulteration out there for pure rose oil. So what you can find is a lot of the companies are now diluting it in a carrier oil like jojoba oil, and it's a 10% solution. So it'll be 10% rose oil to the 90% of carrier oil. So you'll still get the vibration in the oil, but it's not so costly that way.
Right. Well, that's good to know. So we can still indulge a little bit. But, when you think about it in terms of value and you think about 65,000 blossoms just to create 1 ounce of this precious fluid, we begin to understand and tap into what has real value in life. You can go out for a meal in San Francisco or New York City and blow it, blow that same amount of money from 2 to 4 people, right?
Right.
And it's gone. You digest it, gone by morning. And here you have something that's so precious it could last literally for 10 or 20 or even more years in your life if you just use it now and then. It really starts bringing into question the notion of what does have true value. And that brings us to frankincense. Because not only for the mystical experiences, but I want to talk about that, but also the supply of it, how it was valued in ancient times. It was as valuable as gold, more valuable than gold. So let's go into frankincense.
Yes. And I would also say too that along with the rose, these essential oils, what you were just saying about going out to dinner. Yeah, you go out to dinner, have a nice meal. Does it change your life? No, it doesn't. But you can put rose oil on your heart. You can have a life-changing experience, healing an old emotional wound, allowing you to really jump forward in your life. And the same is true with frankincense. These oils, and I've seen it with thousands of clients from around the world, they can literally change your life with one drop.
So let's get into some of the more mystical elements of frankincense and where it grows, and how we find it and the ways it was used historically.
Great. So there's a lot of historical evidence about frankincense being one of the predominant oils for religious ceremony and rite. And in fact, they just uncovered this frankincense trade route about 10 years ago that dates back almost 3,000 years, which went to prove that frankincense was traded around the world, and it was worth more than its weight in gold at one time. And I think that's a lot of the reason that when baby Jesus was born, the 3 wise kings brought 3 gifts for him. One was gold, so it would help him with his material walk. The other was frankincense to keep him connected to his father. So that's an otherworldly connection, right? And then myrrh, which was to take care of his physical body. So if you go back even further, it's interesting to note the biggest use of frankincense was really in the ancient Egyptian culture. And they recognized the value of frankincense as being a way to connect them with the gods. And at one point was reserved only for kings and queens and pharaohs. And eventually what happened was the priests finally relinquished their control, and so lay people started becoming more adept at using frankincense. And then an interesting thing happened along the way. During the Christian Revolution, we lost all reference to anointing and to essential oils and aromatherapy. During the Inquisition, which ran for about 1,000 years, anywhere between, they estimate, 3 to 7 million women were killed for practicing witchcraft, which I am sure I was one of them many times. So we kind of lost it in this culture, and it really wasn't until the early 1900s when we got it back. And when I was doing research for my book, The Sacred Art of Anointing, I went on an exhaustive study to find out what was written about anointing. I went to old manuscript museums and Gnostic archive libraries and online. There was nothing written about it, which led me to deduce that either it was buried in the walls of the Vatican, or it was burned, and there was no reference, because the only thing I found was over 155 references in the Bible.
Interesting. And then, but you, speaking of which, you had your own kind of mind-opening experience when you first experienced frankincense. So you know of what you speak. Can you share that with us?
Yes. So this was 27 years ago, and I was studying with Dr. Valerie Warwood, and she was a doctor, medical doctor, worked with the World Health Organization. She's written scads of book on aromatherapy. And it was the first time I smelled pure Omani frankincense. And I took a big inhale of that aroma, and all of a sudden, I was no longer in the classroom. I was at the foot of the cross watching Jesus be crucified. And I could feel everyone's pain around me. I could smell the desert. I could see the village off in the distance, the aridness of where I was. And I was obviously in this experience for some time, because when I came back into presence, everyone in the class was looking at me. And one woman reached her hand out onto my arm and she said, "Are you okay?" And the first thing I said was, "I want to do anointing work." Now, I'd never heard of that. I didn't know what it meant. I had no idea. And she goes, "Well, what is that?" And I said, "I don't know. I have no idea." So I bought some frankincense from Valerie, and I started using it in my meditations, and I would put a drop on the third eye, the visionary center, and then I'd smell it, and I would just keep smelling it. And I went back to the temple of Dendara, which is an ancient temple of the priestess in Egypt. And they revealed this anointing work to me, or I remembered it, or it awakened in my soul. And I got exquisite detail over the next 6 months. And I just was, oh my gosh, I'm being given something here. So I started putting my friends and family on the table, and I started watching miracles happen. And it's been that way ever since.
I just love it. And I know that one of the other oils that also engenders these mystical experiences to take us into other domains, really, is one called Palo Santo, which I had an experience with. I had never really, that's one oil I had not heard of even. I was with my friend Sandy Sedgbeer, who does radio podcasts as well, delightful, wonderful woman and ally. And she was over for the weekend, and we decided to do a meditation together with a purpose in mind. And I don't remember what the purpose was, but I thought, well, another friend said, we should try a drop of this. Same thing, put it on the forehead, and boom, it acted so fast. Pretty soon I was at a tree, and then I was following myself down the roots of the tree, down to the fungi on the roots, and to the whole structure of fungi as it exists, throughout the planet, and the incredible intelligence and support that fungi gives to this, and life force that fungi gives to this planet and to the people. It was just an amazingly mystical experience. It went on for quite a while and in a lot of detail, and came back. Of course, I have no idea what I was supposed to be doing, but I think the point is that that was my very first drop of Palo Santo oil. And you can't assume because it happens once, that same thing is going to happen again. These are first experiences, like your first frankincense. So
Right.
tell us a little more about Palo Santo, because most people haven't heard of it. And I understand it's really unusual in the way that it's cultivated.
It is. It's a fascinating plant, and the harvesting of it is really quite miraculous. And I just want to say, what a beautiful experience you shared, because again, that opened up an experience of how interconnected everything is,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So that was a life-changing moment. Maybe it's subtle, but it definitely gave you perspective that you didn't have before. And that's just smelling that one drop,
Yes.
right? So Palo Santo is actually called holy wood, and it's grown in Ecuador. It's actually a national treasure. And the interesting thing about Palo Santo is it is in the same family as frankincense. So it has those psychoactive properties too. And as frankincense has been used in the Middle East, Palo Santo has been used in South America for thousands of years by the shamans. And so its first measure is, before they actually figured out how to distill it, because that took a long time, was to use it as an incense to clear negative energies, right? Much like white sage is used by the native indigenous people of North America. But the interesting thing about Palo Santo is that you can't harvest it. You can't cut it down. You can't cut the wood and get any oil out of it. It has to die a natural death, or a branch has to fall off, and it has to lay there for a minimum of 2 years. So just imagine what you would think is this dead log lying on the ground is actually in a process of metamorphosis. It's kind of like the butterfly, right? Goes in and dissolves itself and becomes something entirely different. So in that process, it starts to produce oil in the wood. And then it has even more intelligence. It knows that if you distill it on a full moon, it's going to produce 50% more oil. Now that's intelligence. That's beyond explanation.
It is, and that's one thing that you're really big on helping people understand, is that just as the human species and other animal species are evolving, so is the plant kingdom evolving alongside of us, and some would say in a complementary way, because we're all bathed in the same frequencies, the same challenges, and the plants are such great companions to human beings. The agreement between us to be able to eat them, to be able to use them as essential oils, is a very generous kind of arrangement between species. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I agree. You know, I'm a big believer that everything is connected, that what the quantum physicists are now calling the living mind of God exists in all things everywhere, right? So we're totally connected to those plants as they are to us, and the animals and the earth and everything else. And so it only makes sense that as our planets evolved and we've evolved as a species, that the plants have evolved exactly right beside us, right? So they know that, oh, we're going through a drought, we've got severe climate change, we need to up this chemical constituent to prevent drying out in the summers when we don't get rain. All of those things, all that intelligence is contained inside the essential oil. It's much like the blood in our bodies gives us everything we need in order to survive and thrive, right?
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this. Let's get down to some kind of quick hits on a few of the oils. Like, what are them that people can take away, jot down notes on, and get online and purchase? Or what are the most energizing, for example, to bring energy up, to bring mental clarity and focus back up?
So again, the citrus oils are going to be very uplifting, bring a lot of energy to the body and joy and happiness. But if you're looking for mental clarity and focus, I think the two best oils are rosemary and peppermint. They really wake up the brain and the emotional center and the behavioral center. And I've used both of them on long drives when I think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to make these last 2 hours, right? And I whip out a bottle of rosemary and take some big smells, or I'll put a couple drops on a tissue and stick it in the air vent so it's perfuming my car. And I have no problem after that.
Oh, perfect. Okay, what about the opposite? What about relaxing then? We got a little hint of it when you were talking about the people, the live-in people at the patient home for dementia.
Yeah. So we would start off in the mornings with the citrus to rise everybody up and to get them happy and, cooperative. And then in the evening, lavender was our oil of choice because it's so soothing for the central nervous system and for the emotional center of the brain. And we had no issues of combativeness and sundowning, and they were relaxed. They didn't fight going to bed. So it's a really great oil. And the great thing about lavender is that it's the one oil that you can use undiluted on the skin. And it's also a great oil for children. So if children are having a hard time sleeping at night, you can take, I always suggest 1 or 2 drops in the palm of your hand and dilute it on your hand and then massage it on the spine of the children or put a drop on their pillow. And I've seen that work wonders for night terrors. Sometimes kids go through night terrors as part of their development. So that's a really great one to use. And it's just relaxes the central nervous system. It's calming for the skin. It's calming for the whole body. It's really a beautiful oil.
Thank you on that. And it's ubiquitous. It's fairly affordable. So that's good. I know that all of the oils are climbing up in price because they're in demand, and it's, you can only have so many blossoms on the planet, but
Right.
nonetheless, it's relatively easy to find a good pure one. And we talked about it and teased it a little while ago. Let's talk about the sense that generally speaking, men are most attracted to and women are most attracted to.
Okay, so there was a study done about 27 years ago at the Monell Taste and Smell Foundation by Dr. Alan Hirsch, and he wanted to find out what oils or what fragrance men were most attracted to and what fragrance women were most attracted to. And men came up with vanilla and cinnamon, which to me
Interesting.
is the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, right?
Cookies.
Yeah. And then, of course, we had the Cinnabon in the airports for quite a long time. And they actually had large scale diffusion units in their stores where they would push out the fragrance of vanilla and cinnamon to draw people in, because they've also found that it really influences buying behaviors too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I remember that at the airports. That was just cruel. It was hard to walk by the
Right.
kiosk. Yeah.
Yeah. And then women are entirely different. Women love jasmine and strawberry. Those were the 2 favorite fragrances for women.
Yeah, that makes sense, but strawberry isn't an essential oil, right?
Nope, it's just a fruit, but we love the
That is
smell.
true. That is true. Interesting. So this is good information to have either sex, right? Good information to have if you're maybe starting to date someone or going out to an event and want to have maybe a little special advantage.
Right.
I so appreciate the fact that you shared all of this with us, and we're just about out of time. And any final thoughts on the subject, because there's so much more people can learn about, and I'll give the information about your site and your book in just a moment.
Yeah, and I'm just starting to do a lot of online teaching so people can reach out to me if they want to learn more. Just get in and start using oils. What happens is the more you use them, the more intuitive you become with them. And get a good basic book to start with, and align with the tribe and the teachers. When I learned about aromatherapy, and I'm still learning 40 plus years later, I surrounded myself with the very best teachers in the world: Valerie Warwood, John Steele, Robert Tisserand, Kurt Schnabel, all these amazing teachers. I just surrounded myself with that tribe. And so I really believe in doing that. Surround yourself with the people who know until you get a strong enough intuitive knowing inside of you of how to work with them.
Sounds like great advice. I mean, I'm just a duffer, but for the last 20 plus years, I have a shelf of all of my oils, and some of them are put away if I haven't been using them for a while. But I find that they're just a wonderful, not just aid in life, they just add pure beauty. to life.
I agree on all levels, on all counts. It's been the most blessed, magical, miraculous journey of my life, walking with these plant essences.
Thank you so much for your time, Allison. And I hope that we have a chance to do this again. We got to some of the oils, but not all of them, but I think enough to get people going. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Regina. I really have enjoyed our time together.
And for those of you that would like to get in touch with Allison and her teachings, you can go to AllisonStillman.com. You can also pick up a copy of her book, The Sacred Art of Anointing. And until next time, thank you for joining us here on ReginaMeredith.com.